Hi everyone, welcome back to Java 1 for All. This is the last video about generics, and in this video we are going to see how we can create methods that are generic without having to add the type to the entire class. So let's create a new class inside test. Right click, Java class, generic methods, test 01. Okay, before we start, just to make clear that when we are creating generic classes, we can have as many as types as we want. For example, class several types. So you can have different types here. And each one of these types is a valid type when you create the object. So we could have like an attribute, private t, private x, private a. So when creating the object, you use several types. You have to pass here, for example, you have car, and you have boat, and you have, for example, dog. So it's perfectly valid. You can have as many as you want, especially in frameworks. You will see 2, 3 types being used very often. Okay, so now that we know, and by the way, you can create constructors as well, getters and setters. It works like you have a valid type from the beginning, but well, the type is going to be defined at compilation time. Okay, so let's now create a method that is generic. For example, let me think. Imagine that you want to have a method that will always get one object and return this object inside a list. So it doesn't matter what kind of object you're going to pass, you always need to return the list as the same type of this object. Basically, we start very simple. I'm going to create private static. Private, you can change to public or protected, or use the default package access. Doesn't matter. Static is because I'm going to call from the static method main, and now it comes the syntax. So when you are having the type directly into the method, you must do something like this. Remember, T is just the pattern. You could have any letter here, and it must come before the return. So in this case, I'm not going to return anything, and that's why I'm adding here void. And then create array with one object. And what's the type of the object that I have, that I want inside this array? T. Okay, so now we want a list. What's the type of that list? Well, it's T. I don't know yet. We can import. And then you have list and list.off. Which element you want? This element, T. And here you can print the list. So now, if we call here create array with one object, and for example we pass a boat, a big boat, you will have that list. And the type, if we add a breakpoint, I press Ctrl Shift F10, but if you the breakpoint and then you press Shift F9, you will see that the type of this list, it's already for boats. That's why if you, when you add, of course, remember that when we compile this code, it will not accept different types anymore. It will basically erase because of the type erasure. But when you are passing objects, for this list here, we already have a type defined. It's not very clear, but for example, let's say that I want to return the type of this list now. I just change void to, I'm going to return list T. And here I'm going to remove, and I'm going to return this list. So now that I'm returning this list of T, of course, I know the type of the list will be a list of boats. If I introduce local variable here, you have a list of both. And of course now, this is what I was trying to say, you will not be able to add anything that's not a both because we have the type already defined. So basically, that's how you create generic methods. Just remember, you cannot remove this, otherwise you will get an exception, actually a compilation error, not even an exception. You need this type defined right here. And another thing, the same thing we did for the wildcards, it's also valid. So for example, I want all the objects that are being passed to be a comparable. So T must extend comparable. And remember, comparable is also a interface that expects a type. So here we can tell that the type of this comparable will be T. As you can see, it can get pretty complicated pretty fast, especially when you have more than one type. So be careful when you're using generics. Now, let me just add this here. I will leave it like this because if you want to check out from Git, video it will be 188. And here we have our create array with one object. So basically now, if you go to list off, you understand how it works. So basically this is a method called off that's going to accept this E. This is element. What's the type of the element? I don't know the type of the element. It will be defined by the time I call off. And then we are going to return a list of with this element. And if you go, for example, to collections sort, collections, we were talking about sort. So now you understand. Basically, we have here, we need a type. This type must be a comparable. And this comparable, this type that we are passing, it needs to be either the same type as T or a superclass of T. Remember, we were talking about animal. And then you have the list. So basically, this T must fulfill these conditions. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to tell you. This is the end of generics. Let's continue with more topics in the next video. Bye.